This is our first live reading of the Dr. Martin Luther King speech on Capitol Hill in 1963. I want to give you a little context of the speech, but I'm Dr. George KOONCE, Senior Vice President of University Relations here at Marian University. And we have divided the speech up in 20 different parts, and we're going to read those words of Dr. King live. And it's going to be individuals from the Marian community and some of our special guests from the area. On December 1st, 1955, on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, 42-year-old Rosa Parks was arrested because she wouldn't give up her seat to a white man, triggering a massive boycott. Leading the boycott was a young pastor from Atlanta, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was 26 years old. 8 years after the Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. King delivered I Have a Dream in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was on August 28, 1963, and he delivered the speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to a crowd over 250,000. In his words, we hear frustration because it had been 100 years since President Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation ending slavery. Yet black people were still fighting for the most basic rights to vote, to get education, to work, and to live wherever they wanted, and to just be treated with dignity. Just weeks after Dr. King's speech, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama was bombed, claiming the lives of 4 young black girls, ages 11 through 14. And Dr. King, we hear his words of hope for a better world where there's justice for all of God's children. He repeats, I have a dream, but he also repeats the words with faith. His dreams were rooted in faith and trust in God. Dr. King went on to lead a national movement of civil obedience. And on April 4th, 1968, at the age of 39 and 4 kids and a wife, Dr. King paid with his own life when he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. At Marian University, we have 5 core values that inspire everything we do. Those are community, learning, service, social justice, spiritual traditions. Today, as we read out loud the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we reflect on those core values as we remember the past, but we also look forward in hope and faith. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our readers. We have Miss Sweetness Tilson, Fond du Lac Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year, and she's a senior at Fond du Lac High School. And I think there's a rumor, can I say it? She's coming to Marian University. Dr. Joshua CLARY, Vice President of Student Life and Dean of Students at Marian University. We have Miss Daisy Frazier, President of the Board of Ebony Vision here in Fond du Lac. We have Sister Edie Cruz, Director of Campus Ministry at Marian University, and a member of the Congregation of Sister of St. Agnes. We have Oneida Rosenow, Assistant Professor of Social Work at Marian University. We also have Lieutenant T.J. Fisher of the City of Fond du Lac, and he's also a graduate of Marian University. And we have a young man who's very, very special today. Also, Kevin Simmons, a junior at Marian University from Milwaukee. We also have the Mr. Gary Moyes, Director of the TRIO program, Upward Bound, Adjunct Faculty in International Business, and this year's winner of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Spirit Award. Congratulations. We also have Will Roosh, a missions counselor at Marian University. We have Ms. Kathy Messick, editor of the Oshkosh Northwestern and Fond du Lac Reporter. We have Dr. Michelle Majeski, the president of Marian University. We have Larice SNYDER, district coordinator of equity and inclusion at Fond du Lac School District. Adele Snyder, third grader at Roberts Elementary School. We have Sister Claire LAWLOR, Congregation of Sister of St. Agnes. Luke Townsend, assistant professor of theology and religious education here at Marian. Maya Snyder, first grader at Roberts Elementary School. We have Sister Julianne Crawl, Congregations of Sister of St. Agnes. We have Mr. Drew Cowden, junior here at Marian University, from Covington, Washington, and a member of the men's soccer team. We also have MAKAYLA Parker. She's a senior here at Marian from Pewaukee, Wisconsin, who is currently serving as an academic mentor for the TRIO program. That's our readers for today. And I'm going to start it off, and then we're going to have Miss Sweetness. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of weltering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity.
But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of a Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which comes back marked as insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in this great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we come to cash the check. A check that will give us upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted the citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by the presidents here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil right, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one.
We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied. And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells, and some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed.
Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. And so, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering in the heat of injustice, sweltering in the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will remain straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it again. This is our hope, and this is the faith that I go back to the South with.
With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will one day be free.
And this will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
And so, let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of the Colorados. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
But not only that, Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
That concludes our reading of I Have a Dream speech. A little moving for me, especially when you see our little ones who's going to be leading our great state and our great nation very, very soon. I just want to welcome and thank everybody again for coming. Hopefully we can continue this tradition. Hopefully we have another tradition. If you do like it, please let us know. Reach out to us. I think for our first time out, I think it was okay. But I would like to close with a couple. I'm not going to keep you for a couple minutes. I like to close with a book the Marian community read this past summer. It was by Dr. King. And the title of the book was, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Because we have Dr. King's birthday every year in the celebrations. We had a wonderful breakfast this morning celebrating Dr. King. Just reflected on his work. But we have to ask one another, not now, but when you're going to pick up your nieces or nephews or your son or daughters from daycare, we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to really make a difference? Because we know we don't want chaos. And we all know what community looks like. Because if you don't know what community looks like, all you have to do is look to your left and look to your right. This is community. We love you and thank you and see you and have a great 2023. Love you.